graduate of MSU. I just graduated last year with my master's in nonprofit leadership, global cultures, which is a fairly new one that Dr. Jennifer Marcy heads up. So anyway, I was looking for something specific on the website, and then your name popped up, and I'm like, oh, I would love to do an episode on food rules and food justice, like food justice in a different slant. Like I've done some stuff for like fresh produce and stuff, urban gardens and that kind of stuff. But this one's a little bit of a different slant on it. So I thought maybe you could just start with what your role is at MSU.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you. Yeah, so I am an assistant professor in the philosophy department at MSU, and I'm in a tenure track position, so that means like theoretically it's permanent. But assistant professor is the most junior rank, so I'm applying for tenure this year. So hopefully, if that goes through, then it will become a permanent job. But yeah, there are three main parts to my job: teaching, research, and service. So I teach classes to undergrads and grads in bioethics or healthcare ethics, food ethics, and feminist philosophy. Those are my three main areas. Some of the classes I teach are very small, like grad seminars, probably similar to what you took in your master's program.
Yeah.
You know. And then I also teach like big 100-person undergrad healthcare ethics classes pretty regularly. And then for my research, it's philosophical research, so it's not like in a lab or doing interviews. It's more reading, writing, publishing papers, going into conferences, giving talks, that sort of thing. And then I also have a service component to my work, which is like being on committees, things like that. And organizing talks. So I do organize a lot of online talks about food and philosophy of food with this group called Culinary Mind. We have a lot of our talks online, actually. If anyone's interested, it's culinarymind.org.
Okay.
It's a very international group, and we do a lot of online events, and everyone's welcome. So if folks get interested in philosophy of food, that's a great place to learn more. So yeah, that's basically my gig.
Yeah. Well, I'll definitely grab that link and put the culinary in the show notes so people can access it. And I think I have at least one of the videos that you've done already that I'll put in there too. And I didn't realize that service component, which of course makes sense, I guess, being on boards and stuff like that, committees and stuff. But it's still an interesting thing to know. I think people are always curious, what do professors do? Like,
Yeah.
one of those fields that's kind of abstract in that sense, like you don't really know what people do.
Yes.
But how did you become interested? So I guess in two things. One, in feminine bioethics, which I had never heard that title before. So I guess what is feminine bioethics? How did you get interested in it? And then also food ethics.
Yeah. So feminist bioethics, I guess the short version is, so bioethics is like healthcare ethics is another word for it. It's a little bit broader though. It's not, you can think about things outside of healthcare that just have to do with health, maybe not specifically about like, medicine. But the feminist part, it just means that you're thinking about issues related to health and healthcare from an angle of gender and thinking critically about gender. So how does gender play into how people are thinking about health or medicine, or how do gendered stereotypes and concepts sort of usually like get in the way of doing good ethical medicine or promoting health in an actually helpful way, right? So things like, how do ideas about toxic masculinity prevent some men from going to the doctor, right? So thinking about that critically would be part of the feminist bioethics. And so with both of well, I guess I should say what food ethics is too, and then I'll say how I get into it. But so food ethics is basically just a field of study that says, like, how should we eat? And like questions about how should we eat, how should we produce food, how should we distribute food, like all these kind of should questions having to do with food. And my work focuses on like a little bit of a different angle on eating instead of food. So
Yeah.
eating is obviously you're eating food, but it's an activity, right? That's kind of we can think about how food is produced, how it's grown, how it's shipped, how it's prepared, those sorts of questions. Lots of people working on those. My work tends to focus on the activity of eating when we're eating by ourselves, when we're eating with other people.
Mm,
Sort of how should we do that? And because I come at it from philosophy, it's not just answering that question like, oh, well, we should eat healthily. Okay. It's like, well, why? What does that mean? Right? We're
right.
digging into like, what does that mean and why and who says? And should we listen to them? And what are the implications of doing things this way, and do they align with the values we have or should have? And if they don't, then could we do things differently? So that's the philosophical piece. So it's not just answering those or asking and answering how should we eat or how should we produce food, but like really digging into the different possible answers you could give and what makes a good answer, what makes a less good answer, and
Right.
why. um so yeah, so I got into both of those fields through philosophy. I didn't know what philosophy was until I went to undergrad. I never heard of it. I know I did my PhD at Georgetown, which is a Jesuit school. I know a lot of
Yeah.
folks who go to Catholic schools get to do philosophy like all the way through because it's a
Yeah.
central part of a lot of Catholic education, but I didn't have that. So I I hadn't heard about it. But then I kind of encountered it in undergrad and I was like, this is so cool. Like asking these big questions, like what is the meaning of life? Or like what is truth? What is beauty? Like those sorts of things. And thinking carefully about them, writing about them. I liked that. But I didn't decide to do it for a profession until I sort of came across some feminist philosophy about dieting.
Yeah.
So there's this, especially in the 90s, there were quite a few feminist philosophers who were writing about weight loss dieting and critiquing that. So people like Sandra Barkey or Susan Bordeaux, those are names people can look up if you're interested. But it, I had always been on a diet. I had always kind of struggled with food, like since I was in grade 5. So like since I was young. And I had watched a lot of the women, especially around me, my family also really struggle with food. And when I realized, oh, I can think philosophically about this, I can critique, there's a critique to be had. Things don't have to be this way. It doesn't actually align with my values, right?
Mm,
It's kind of helped me realize that it's harmful to think about food and eating in this way, to do eating and food in this way. And that was like a revelation. That was life changing for me. Just realize like, oh, I don't have to I don't have to think about food in my body in this particular way, and philosophy can help me think differently.
yeah.
So that's really how I got into it, and I decided to I did a master's degree, worked on feminist work on weight loss dieting, and then in my PhD program, I continued with some of that work, but sort of expanding out beyond just weight loss dieting, thinking about other kinds of ways of eating, like healthy eating,
Yeah.
and how that relates to weight loss dieting. And that's complicated. um,
Right.
but yeah, so that's kind of how I got into it. And now I'm still there's still so many things to think about and talk about when it comes to food and eating from a philosophical perspective. So now I've been doing this for like over 15 years, and I'm
Wow.
still got lots to think about there. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. So many things. Um, thinking about, with this podcast is living faith, doing justice. And so many faith religions, depending on what you follow. And of course, we're Catholic, but you would say the same about Jewish, the faith, and Muslim faith, and others. There's so much that they all of them seem to have rituals that revolve around some type of eating. So, of course, in the Catholic Church, we have the Eucharist, which is a form of eating, but then we also it's very we tend to eat together a lot, right? Like that's a cultural community aspect of, being in community together, that we eat, potlucks or whatever we want to call them, socials and stuff. And so I think that this plays a big role, especially as Jesuits who are thinking about how can we be ethical, how can we be just. In your video, you talk about food rules, and I think that is important maybe for people of faith to think about, not just understand, but I mean think about what do we mean by food rules. So can you talk about um, maybe give examples of spoken and unspoken rules and what you mean by good food, bad food, just food rules in general?
Yeah. So, you know, I think not everybody has options for what they can eat, right? So some
Right.
people are very constrained by what they can eat. Or there's some people live in contexts where it's like, yeah, there's just not a lot of options or personal choice when it comes to what and how much to eat. But when we do have freedom about that, then it kind of presents this opportunity and problem, right? Well, okay, now how should I do this? Right?
Right.
And you have, I think, eating in contexts like this, eating becomes such a site of what's called like normative pressure. So normative means like having to do with shoulds, right? So you
Right.
should do it this way, you should do it that way, you don't, or you shouldn't do it this way. There are so many assumptions and ideas and about what good food and good eating are, or what good eaters should do. And I think a lot of these take the form of food rules. So sort of like hard and fast, like this is the way to eat right. um,
Yeah.
and they're coming at us from all different directions, right? You get them from your family, from your culture in general, from religious traditions, advertising, of course, social media is a huge one.
Yeah.
Also in like nutritional science and medicine, public health, just and then just people trying to sell you stuff. Like, there these shoulds are just coming at us from all different directions. And I think some of these food rules are like fine, right? They're defensible. They're based in facts. They're based in things that align with our values that we can, endorse. But a lot of food rules are just based on pure misinformation. They're actually trying to mislead you because they want you to buy things.
Hmm.
They're based on exaggerations. They don't align with our values if we really dig into them. And following them or feeling like you should follow them and that you're doing something wrong by not living up to the food rules, it can be really harmful. It can cause a lot of suffering, I think. So, I mean, just some examples. I'm curious what food rules maybe you encounter in your life, but like people who grew up as part of the clean plate club, right? Always clear your
Right.
plate. That's a food rule. And you can think about that as like the value behind that is we don't want to waste food, right? We want to be careful about, and that's valuable, that's important. But it can also have this edge of like, okay, well, if you have to finish everything on your plate, even if you're not hungry, even if you don't like it, even if it makes you feel ill, then what we're doing is learning to ignore our bodies and our internal signals about when to stop eating or what to eat and what not to eat. And that can have some, serious costs. um, but other rules like just watch what you eat, but that you should be paying attention to it all the time, usually with like health or diet, like weight loss in mind. Things like my uncle has some food rules like vegetables are for rabbits. And real men eat meat. That's another kind of often implicit but sometimes explicit food rule. Or just things like eat a balanced diet, which can seem pretty, reasonable. Maybe it's based on nutrition, but what does it actually mean when it comes down to it, and is a little harder to spell out. Um, so yeah, lots of different food rules. And then so philosophically, right? Again, not all the food rules are bad, but you have to kind of dig into them a bit, right? Like, what is this actually asking of me and asking of other people? What are the values behind it? What are the assumptions about, bodies and food that are behind it? Are they true? Are they accurate? Or are they false, exaggerated? Is someone like, what's the motivation here? Someone trying to sell me something? Because sometimes, just because someone's trying to sell you something doesn't mean it's automatically wrong. But that's something that we should be cautious about. So yeah, I don't think that food rules are necessarily bad. Or good, right? It's just we have to ask, um,
Yeah.
and kind of dig into that. And I think it's really complicated, or it can be, to figure out how to eat in a way that um, helps you flourish and helps you live a good life and helps you do all the things you want to do with your life, with your health, with your community, with your family, that sort of thing. Um, and sometimes these food rules can get in the way of those. So that's, I guess, from my perspective, that's what we want to be looking out for. Like, what are the food rules that I'm buying into, and are they actually helping me live the
Right.
life that I want to live, or are they kind of getting in the way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. Oh, I'm a little bit older than you, but yeah, I remember so I was the age of you had to have milk
Yeah.
with every meal. And of course, as someone who has a hmm sensitivity bordering
Yeah,
on
me too.
allergy, I dreaded mealtime because I would feel so ill afterwards, and it wasn't until I got into my teens and young adulthood, and of course then they started talking more about that publicly, right, dairy and stuff, and I'm like, oh, when I cut this out, I don't hate mealtime anymore. you know um so yeah, there's different ways, and I think even I mentioned off camera that my family is Catholic, but I was part of the evangelical church for a long time, and their potlucks and stuff, it was very big on everything had to be home cooked, especially if you're
Yes.
going to bring baked goods, it had to be home cooked. So, um, and it was almost like you're almost shamed if you brought a store-bought pie or something like that, or
Hmm.
yeah, like that, which ironically I opened my own parish later on, and I was like, I don't care if you bring KFC, and so we would have people who would bring a bucket of KFC or
Yeah.
a pizza from Little Caesars to put on the potluck table. It kind of became the norm, just of wanting to change up some of those rules. Um, so yeah, I definitely see the idea, and you mentioned, of course, social media. So like food influencers have, I think, really played a role in perpetuating some of those um, unspoken rules that, or I guess they're spoken actually if you're if it's social media, but
Some are, yeah, some are
yeah.
not, but yeah.
So I was thinking a little bit about the rise of the trad wife movement. I'm not sure how familiar you are with
Hmm.
it. It seems to be fairly mainstream. And so a lot of it has resulted in a resurgence of toxic diet culture, which you had talked a little bit about that, even with some like celebrities going back towards like severe anorexia. Um, so how do you think we could practically especially in like a faith community or just communities in general, how could we address some of these toxic ideas? Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I actually I just taught a grad seminar on where one of my students, PhD students, Hannah Scott, she wrote a paper about trad wives and
Oh,
raw milk, actually.
oh
So
gosh, yes.
I've been reading about this. Her paper was excellent. So I learned a lot about the trad wife stuff from Hannah's paper. Um, so Hannah pointed out that, like, the trad wife content, a lot of people are attracted to the aesthetics of it. It's very beautiful, it's pastoral, sort of like nature, romanticized farm life, gorgeous kitchens, like cute kids, nice outfits, things
Yeah.
like this. And there is, this aesthetic also of making food from scratch that can be very, I mean, people love to watch cooking shows in general, right? Like, it's just
Right.
can be a very enjoyable thing to watch. And I don't think there's anything necessarily toxic about any of that, like this sort of just appreciating a certain aesthetic. But what is toxic, can be toxic about this trad wife content is underlying it, right? They're presenting this view of gender, a very narrow view of gender and how to do gender and femininity specifically, right? So it's like this message about what does it mean to be a good woman? And that means you have to be a wife, you have to be a mother, you have to do wifing and mothering in a very specific way. It's just like staying at home, making all the food from scratch, right? That's a really important part of that. You are always need to be attractive to your husband at all times, right? You're staying at home. There's like a very I will say narrow view of what it means to be a good woman presented in this content. And the sort of underlying justification, or one of them for that, of that view in this content, is that this is the natural way for women to be. This is naturally how women should be, how they should want to be, how they should enjoy being, right? That women should find this way of living satisfying, that it should come easily to them, that it should satisfy all their desires, very fulfilling. And the flip side of that is that any other way of living life as a woman is unnatural, right? So of course it's not satisfying. Of course, it's not actually feeling fulfilling for women to work outside the home, or to not be married, or to not be in a straight relationship, or to not have kids, because that's all unnatural, right? That's the kind of implicit flip side there. So it's used to promote a certain way of being, and also to criticize other ways of living your life. People who don't live that way, who don't want to live that way, especially, right? It kind of serves as a critique of them, like, well, you're doing womanhood wrong. You just don't understand what's natural for you, and you should. So I think that's the part that can be really toxic, right? When you're getting this message and it's kind of training you to think and feel a certain way about maybe yourself or other women in your life, and to judge their lives and your own life according to this standard. It's like, yes, that can be a way to live a good life for some people, right? But in my view, there are lots of different ways to live a good life as a woman, or as anybody, right? And like a big part of, for me, what a good life is about is that people get to decide for themselves. They get to use their skills and capacities and talents and interests and everything to figure out what is a good life for me, and then hopefully have the resources to build the life for themselves. And it's when people present you with this very narrow view of like, well, you have to do it this way, this is the only way for you to live a fulfilling life, that cuts off all these other, wonderful, potentially fulfilling, beautiful possibilities. And I think that's very toxic. So I think, and just because you watch something or look at a post doesn't mean you're like absorbing and agreeing with the underlying message, of course, right? But I do think there's lots of ways that, you see this stuff, it kind of teaches you implicitly, at least, like what to find attractive, what to find beautiful, what to find interesting, what to find good. And if you're not careful about like, okay, what do I actually agree with the message of this is the right way to be, or this is the good way to be? Do I actually agree with that? Or can I look at it and appreciate what I like about it, but leave the other stuff out of it? I think that's where it's important to kind of have that critical perspective, and okay, maybe I don't want to be just absorbing this messaging uncritically, because it's gonna do weird things to my sense of what's good and right and valuable. Just having conversations where like point out, oh, this is the message behind this, and let's talk about that. Do we agree with that? Yes or no? Like, why? What's good about it? What's not good about it? instead of just absorbing it and letting it sort of sink in in a way
Right?
that might be harmful. Yeah.
Yeah. One day, in your faith rituals, you can't undo the other 6 days of the week or whatever
Right.
that you absorb. Um, yeah, and I think and adding to diversity to that, like adding, so for example, for myself as a vegan slash vegetarian, depending on the day,
Hmm.
um, I've tried to add in a diverse group of people that I'm listening to, so recipes from African Americans or Indian, people with Indian backgrounds or Asian backgrounds, so that I'm not stuck in this. This is the only way to eat as a vegan or vegetarian, and that there are other ways to uh, incorporate that food and embrace that, you know, eating style in my life. Um, and so I think, yeah, even not even just that, but having a little bit more diversity on your on your feed, right? Your social media feed. Which ironically that's what we call it, as a feed.
Yeah.
As a
I hadn't
page.
thought about that, but that's true. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I do I get that. Like you can follow them, but there is a sense of, if that's the only thing you have on your social feed, it's like it is really gonna stick with you, right? Because it's
Yeah, or it can. And I think, I think these sort of implicit understandings of like, well, this is the, we might not consciously think this is the only way, right way to eat, or this is the only right way to be, but it's just sort of, these beliefs can kind of linger in the back of your mind, and they can do work in the way that you live your life, even if you're not realizing it. So I think, yeah, having a diversity um, perspectives, it doesn't mean you have to like all the perspectives or agree with them, but at least it's sending this message to this implicit part of your brain, like, oh, there are different ways to think about this, and
right.
actually I get to decide, for myself, how I want to do it, and there are lots of options. Like
Yeah,
even just having that sort of openness, I think, can be
right.
really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of acts as a disruptor to your neural feeds or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sense of, right, of diversity and inclusivity. Because a couple questions that come to mind. Um, like, what are some practical ways that we might live this out in our communities, whether it's community in general, like your social communities, your neighborhoods, or your community in the sense of faith communities? Like, what are some practical ways that we could live out where we can be more inclusive, um, or diverse, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was thinking about, your podcast focus on social justice and in relation to this kind of question of inclusivity, because, we're thinking about, what is the point of sharing food with others? Like,
Right.
what are we trying to do when we do that? And there are lots of different things that we can do over food that are extremely valuable, right? And I was thinking about, social justice is, to me, about ensuring everyone has a fair opportunity to participate in the things that are valuable, that our society, that our community has to offer, that help us build a good life for ourselves. To go back to that, like, bit about how to build a good life, right? To social justice is about making sure everyone has that opportunity to participate in those things that can
Yeah.
build a good life, right? And so things like connecting with community, celebrating, commemorating important events, sharing religious or cultural traditions, like a lot of that is done over food. Sometimes the food is central, sometimes it's just on the side of the other things we're doing, but there's often food there. And for people who have food allergies or intolerances, or they eat differently than other people for whatever reason, ethical reasons, religious reasons, whatever, having the food can make it really complicated and
Mm.
sometimes impossible to participate in these, community events, these shared events, because, in some cases with allergies, especially, that can be a life or death situation,
Mm.
right? So actual physical danger. But other times it can be inappropriate for somebody to participate in a meal where the food is not matching with their religious commitments or ethical commitments or something like that. Or the food can make them ill, but not in ways that are deadly,
Right.
just make you feel sick, and that kind of thing. But turning food down or saying no to food that people are offering you can make things very tense. It can create a lot of conflict, discomfort, and that can all undermine, whatever you're trying to do with the event, right? You're trying to connect, share, celebrate, whatever. Now you have this situation of conflict and tension, and people feel awkward and all this stuff because of the food. So I think, a few practical things to keep in mind, like if you are organizing an event, to make it inclusive, to make it welcoming, to make sure everybody can participate in it if they want, like some basic things like transparency goes a long way. Like if there's going to
Yeah.
be food, tell people there's food, tell them what it will be,
Yeah.
so that people can make a decision for themselves. Is it safe for me to come? Maybe they can bring in food if, a dish to share or something like that. Invite people to bring food so they know, well, at least I'll have this one thing that is appropriate for me
Right.
to eat, safe for me to eat. Also, labeling dishes with ingredients, like if you're having, a table of food, just little note cards with here's what's in this, so people can make informed decisions for themselves and maybe not have to ask people, because that can be, people can feel awkward about that. Asking like, well, what is in this? What is in this? Are you sure that there's no nuts in this?
Yeah. Right.
That kind of thing. And then, I think also for everybody, whether you're hosting or just participating in an event, like trying to be open-minded about how other people eat. I think so. There is research showing that a lot of people who eat differently, whether they have celiac or intolerances or allergies or whatever, often feel very judged
Mm.
and disbelieved when they tell people, I can't eat that, or no, thank you, I don't want to eat that. And then people are asking questions and it, yeah, they feel either very judged or just people don't believe that they have these issues. And that can be extremely discouraging, right? And unwelcoming. And then people might avoid events that they would otherwise love to participate in because they're worried, if I go, people are going to ask me and they're going to be like, well, I never heard of anyone being celiac like back in the day or whatever. And so I think just being open-minded, like people eat differently for lots of different reasons. We can be charitable toward other people and just believe them when they tell us, this is how I need to eat, or this is what I need to feel safe around food. Um, and and that can go a long way, I think, to
Right.
helping people feel welcome, whether the food is safe for them or not. But I guess the more general point is just when you're having an event, like think about, what is this event for? What are we trying to do? Right?
Right.
Are we trying to celebrate something? Are we trying to welcome people into our community? Are we trying to share a cultural or religious tradition with people? And if there are people you want to be there and who want to be there, but who will be excluded by food, right? Is maybe there's a way to do the event where food is not as central or without food, right? If you want to welcome new neighbors over, maybe you just invite them for tea, or you invite them to sit on the porch and then have a
Yeah.
chat instead of having a meal, or you go bowling with your friends, or like there are different things you can do, right, that aren't so food centric, that allow you to still connect with people and get the goods out of spending time with people, without adding the food complication in. Um,
Right.
so I think that's also something to keep in mind.
Yeah. And that's a good point of it doesn't always have to be food. Like we could have an event and say, we're not going to be providing food. So if you need something to eat, bring it yourself, whatever. Like
Mhm.
should be, again, like I mentioned, because I was in the evangelical world for a long time, like literally every event, like,
Right.
like board meetings had food, everything had food. And after a while, you just became overwhelmed that everything had to have food. And you made a comment about about people not believing and, I never even heard of celiac disease. And so as someone, I mean, I have EDS and MCAS, and so I struggle with food sensitivities, um, and we had actually had a client, my husband had a client that we were invited to a barbecue. And at that time, I wasn't even a vegan, but I was limiting my meat because I don't do well digesting it. I have a very slow
Sure.
digestive tract. And literally everything that was served had meat. It was either meat or had meat in it. And um, one person brought a salad that didn't have it in it. And I was like, oh, something I can eat.
Yeah.
And so, but one of the things that I do hear people say a lot is like, nobody had all these allergies back in my day. Now, sometimes they're saying it very dismissively, right? But
Mhm.
sometimes they're just genuinely like, where did all these allergies come from? What happened? Like, I don't remember this kind of a thing. So I don't know how much of your background could speak to that, but anything you could share about, like, how can we address this when that comes up and people ask about it?
Yeah. So I think that's actually quite a common experience for people who have food allergies or sensitivities to have people say that to them. I wrote this paper. The title starts with "The Worst Dinner Guest Ever" because I saw it was I found a blog post that was talking about people who have allergies, sensitivities, who are vegan, that sort of thing, and it was describing them as like the worst dinner guests ever and what to feed them.
Yeah.
um, so I wrote a paper about this, but there's a lot of sociological research showing that, yeah, people who eat differently, especially for medical reasons, a lot of people love to comment on it and they love to tell you like
Yeah.
um like well I back in the day like nobody ever had these allergies, and I think there can be a few things behind that. One, like you said, sometimes it's just curiosity, like, oh yeah, I just noticed like when I was young people didn't talk about food allergies or celiac or whatever, and now they do. Like, I wonder if it's true that there are more cases now, or if we just are better at diagnosing it now. And so it seems like there's more, but there was and I actually, there's a cool book by Matthew Smith called Another Person's Poison, A History of Food Allergy,
Mm,
that I read for some of my research. I think he suggests it's a bit of both, right?
yeah.
That they're we don't really understand why the rates of food allergy and things like that have increased somewhat, but also we're just way better at finding them
Right.
now. And so
Yeah.
and so it's probably a combination of both those things, higher rates and also better at diagnosing. Um, but yeah, I do think that sometimes when people say something like that, it is meant to be a bit dismissive. Like, well, it can't possibly be real. Some people must be faking it, right? Because
Right.
like, why would there be a higher rate now? And I do I do think some of it is sort of related to the nostalgia that like the trad wives are
Mm,
playing into too. Like back in the day, everybody could have milk uh, for every meal and it wasn't a problem. And now people are like, I'm lactose intolerant. It's like, by the way, lactose intolerance is like extremely common around the world and has
yeah.
been forever. It's just
Right. I know.
yeah, so
We
but
just
yeah,
called them soy milk babies, instead of
I was
actually
yeah.
listing them as having a food sensitivity. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I was a soy milk baby for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think there is something about that, like cultural nostalgia for some time where things were easier. And I guess me being charitable, I do think that sometimes people, if they're hosting, they want to make sure people have food that they can enjoy and eat safely, and they can feel overwhelmed if it's somebody who has a diet that they're not familiar with, right? Well, what do I even feed this person? I don't know, and it can come out of a place of concern for like, I wish everyone would just eat the same thing because then I would know what to feed them.
Right.
Um, and that makes sense. Like I'm also vegetarian when I but I wasn't raised vegetarian. And when I started that, I did not know what to feed myself, right?
Right.
I was just eating a lot of bread with cheese on it, because I was like grilled cheese. Yes, that's vegetarian. It took me a while to figure out that there are other things you can eat, but so I kind of, like, you are in the position of somebody's coming to you saying, I can't eat this. I need X, Y, and Z. Like, again, trying to be charitable, like just believe people when they tell you. And if
Yes.
you're hosting, right, like you want them to have something nice to eat or safe at least to eat, right? And so trying to work with people to make sure that they don't go hungry. But then, yeah, for people who have the food sensitivities, it just can be really challenging to navigate that. And because you don't want to be rude to the host, you don't want to seem like you're criticizing them. It's just a challenging context, right? And you just try to be as transparent and charitable as possible from both sides about like,
Right.
here's the food we have. Can you eat that? Yes or no? How about I bring something? Or I'll come. I love to come. I won't share in the food, but I'd love to come and hang out. Or, you
Yeah.
know, um, some negotiation, I guess, might be needed. But well, one more thing I'll add. I do think like asking people to be charitable, I think is right. We should try to
Right.
be charitable, right? It's a
Yeah.
virtue anyway. um, but I do think also something that can be behind that sort of comment is what's called like ableism sometimes,
Mhm.
right? Like this idea that and this is kind of connected to the nostalgia piece that we see in a lot of places in society right now. Like, oh, people used to be tougher. People used to be healthier, and now people are weaker. Now people are more sensitive in a bad way. And especially when it comes to things that are like invisible. So people talk about invisible disabilities or invisible chronic illnesses, right? Where really a lot of the symptoms are on the inside,
Right.
right? And so other people can't see that you're suffering or that you would suffer if you ate certain things. Or like, to be frank, right? A lot of times with food sensitivities, talking about how they affect you is not polite dinner conversation, right? Because it's a lot of
Right.
bathroom
Yeah.
related
Right.
problems. And so, it's something people often want to keep private. And I think there can be like a layer of ableism too, where people are just like, wow, I don't, you need to suck it up, right? You need to be tougher.
Right.
And I don't actually believe because I saw you eat that before and you seemed fine, or um, and where we find that coming up in ourselves and our own attitudes, maybe that's a kind of implicit belief that we have in the back of our minds, like I was talking about before. Like, that's definitely worth critiquing, right? Because that's not that's not a generous, charitable, or kind
Right.
or realistic attitude to have. There are lots and lots of invisible disabilities and invisible chronic illnesses, and we should believe people when they tell us they have them, and especially if we want to connect with them in our communities, right? Like, be be kind, be charitable,
Yeah.
believe them. Yeah.
Yeah. And most of the time, it it doesn't really cost you much more time or energy. Like, I know one of the things we do is we have a gluten-free, dairy-free, nut-free table.
Hmm.
And so we put those items specifically on one table so that we don't have to worry about like tongs or something being accidentally
Yes.
cross-contaminating. Because we have a few people who are like highly sensitive, like they can't even do like, if you touch nuts with a tong and then touch something else, that kind of thing.
Yes.
And so we of course we label that table, and then we try to label the items. Um, yeah, and because there's also weird things like you made the comment about, well, I saw you eat that before, like people who have
Mm,
MCAS. Some days you can eat that, and
right.
some days you can't eat that.
That's right.
Um, and we don't know why our bodies do that, or will let us eat it one time and not another time. but we know that most of the time when we eat it, it's going to be
Hmm.
a bad day for the next 24 hours. So, so yeah, I think that some of the things you said and about labeling stuff with ingredients is important, which is time consuming. But if you're making a card for just your dish, it's not as time consuming, right? Um,
Yes, you
if
can
you're
share the labor. Yeah.
yeah, so you can share the labor, that kind of stuff. Um, and bringing, like I typically will bring a specific dish, like some kind of a side, to Thanksgiving or whatever, because
Yes.
Thanksgiving has all the meats, like
Yes.
literally everything in it. Everything I like, all the traditional, I should say, the traditional white dishes,
Midwestern
white
dishes.
people,
Yeah.
Midwestern white people Thanksgiving dishes. Every one of them has something in it I can't eat. So, um, and I find that a lot for other people I know as well. But I do think there is a sense where you're right. Some of it is been the allergies have increased, but I remember having a girlfriend in elementary school who couldn't do dairy products or chocolate, which of
Hmm.
course made birthday parties, difficult for her. Um, so yeah, I think those are a lot of good points that you make. Um, is there anything else on this topic? Like maybe that's a passion of yours that you like to talk about, or something that I didn't ask that you really want to share for people to know or think about?
I guess I'll just add, to bring back the feminism piece that we were talking about
Yeah.
before, because you mentioned, it can be a lot of labor to label things, or did you do this planning? Like a lot of food work falls on women, right? It's sort of a gendered expectation that women are the people who come up with the menus and do the grocery shopping and do the food prep and make sure people get fed. Of course, not all families work like that, and people arrange their housework in different ways, but it is still uh, like worldwide. Most common for women to do most of the food work. And, just acknowledging that and saying like, okay, that's another thing that we can ask, like, okay, like that's an assumption, or that's like we assume that things will work that way, but does that align with our values, right? Is that working for us? Like in our family or our community. And of course, many women enjoy doing that work, but not everybody does. Many women are good at that work, but not everybody is.
Mhm.
And so thinking about like this labor, especially when we are doing something that is or is perceived as adding more labor to what's already being done, like, okay, now we're going to label all the food at our events, or now we're going to make sure we're going to add in this allergy table, and um, and we're going to be thinking about people's safety. We need to be really thinking about people's safety and taking responsibility for that. That is more labor, right? And so thinking about, well, how can we make sure this labor is distributed fairly, that people are contributing, um, sharing the work, but also like who is expected to do it, and does that make sense for us? Like, are there other people who could contribute that we can ask to lend a hand who maybe aren't, just because we have these gendered assumptions in play? And then also just to make sure we show appreciation for all the food work that gets done, because I think it is so valuable, right? Like eating with other people is a really valuable human activity. It
Right.
brings us together in so many different ways. And you mentioned Thanksgiving, so I'm originally from Canada. When I first moved to the States to study, I was away from my family. I have a large extended family, away from them for the first time for holidays. And I just remember sitting there sort of by myself, like, oh yeah, like Thanksgiving doesn't happen unless like my mom, my aunts, my grandmother are making Thanksgiving. Like they make all of the holidays special.
Yeah.
They're the ones that do all this work. And I personally, I did really take that for granted until I was away, and then I was like, okay, I guess I have to do the work if I want to have a nice holiday for myself. So yeah, just acknowledging like who's doing this work, does this make sense, and whoever ends up doing the work, huge thanks to them for
Right.
for doing this work that is so valuable for us in so many different ways. So yeah, I'll add that in too.
Yeah, that's cool. I know this past Easter, my son who bought a house not too long ago offered to do Easter. We ended up having it at my house for a different reason, but I was like, oh, that's kind of nice. Like, you know, um, and so thinking about it, and then also, but also was like, yay, I taught my son how to cook.
Well, yeah, I mean, so this is one of the things like I think people have sometimes have a misconception about feminism as being um, as only focused on women, but it's about gender in general and the ways
Right,
that gendered assumptions disadvantage people, often mostly the disadvantage falls on women, but also on men, like when and boys, when we're thinking, well, food work is women's work, boys don't learn how to cook.
right,
That's a huge life skill that's super valuable and many boys enjoy or would enjoy
right,
if they got to do it. And same with event planning, things like that.
right,
Like why deprive anybody of the opportunity to learn those skills that are very helpful and useful to have and they might really love to do because of weird gender assumptions, right? We don't need to
right,
do that.
right.
So yeah.
Yeah. So that's cool. Well, thank you so much. This has been great. I can't wait for this to post.